actually in the beginning we were informed that it's 20 something slides and then it's cut to 10, so you get some informations being cut. I don't know how to squeeze them shorter than this. So this is the structure. I will talk about the context because this research happens in 4 countries. What Indonesian context is, very quick, everything in one slide, like context, everything in one slide, and research, everything squeezed into one slide, and findings, few slides about maybe the price, the profile, etc. And then we will conclude in the conclusion section, one slide also. So the context of Indonesia as of this year, it's 11.3% poverty rate, but and mostly in rural areas. The poor people live in rural areas, and as in other emerging economies, most of the economies relies heavily on informal sectors. So I put 50% there, but you would believe that it's 90% actually, or 99%. And open employment is pretty low in statistics, but it's about 7.1 million, but underemployment and unpaid employment is getting higher. So we can check that out from the good figures there. And it's the SDI, Human Development Index. Indonesia is medium level country. We're in 108 and we've been there for over the last decade, I think. Gender Development Index, kind of in the middle, and low for the Gender Development Index. Gender inequality is pretty good, including the MDGs achievements. Goal 1 on poverty and hunger is mostly accomplished, but for the MDGs target. But if we compare these kind of indicators with other peer economies, we're quite low compared to other BRICS or the new one, I don't know the acronyms recently, the Mexico and others countries like Turkey, etc. We're pretty low. And principally Indonesian foundation founders not favors but endorse cooperative as the main economic institution. So this is the policy context of Indonesian social enterprise actually. Whereas the economic institution suitable for Indonesia is cooperative because it has the family or societal values and not just for profit seeking. It's fundamental and it's in the constitution, in the preamble. So in the law, but the laws and regulations mainly regulate about MSMEs, that's micro, small, medium enterprises, communities and social organizations, non-profits, the law about foundations in 2001, and we have also other laws in 2008 about MSMEs, and a huge movement called Entrepreneurship movement, managed by over a dozen of ministries in Indonesia, and we have a lot of laws about cooperatives, laws and government regulations about zakat, that's Islamic arms, and etc. But there's no law specific about social entrepreneurs currently. And the history of social enterprise in Indonesia can be traced back to the colonial era. It's Muhammadiyah in the 1920s. Also some part I didn't mention here about the Christian missionaries from the Dutch government at the time. And then in a pretty modern area, Bina Swadaya, Pak Bambang is here. It's very honored to have Pak Bambang, who started Bina Swadaya in 1960s during Suharto's early regime, and most recently, like in 1990s, Dompet Duafa. Also, he will be a speaker in the second day, I think, of the conference. And most recently, many SEs with environmental concerns mushroomed in urban areas like urban waste management, or the waste banks, recycled crafting, etc. This is related with raising middle class in urban areas in Indonesia. And also, most of NGOs based, there are a lot in urban and rural areas, but in urban areas we found that they are less commercial. And institutions and businesses related to Islamic economic concept, I think that's what it is. Islamic concepts progress rapidly. Yeah. After the context, the research, I don't put the objectives. We share same objective as Bangladesh research also, the 3 objectives you might have seen before. So mapping and everything, I can say I will copy from your presentation. And rapid appraisal, we have 2 mixed methods. So rapid appraisal is qualitative. We interviewed some prominent public figures in social enterprises. We have about 10 people interviewed, and also survey for the CEO of social enterprises and also the staff. So we have 59 social enterprises. Sampling is purposive and snowballing because we found from the databases by the government agencies that a lot of them actually are not there, or they don't want to be interviewed, they don't give us consent, and then they give recommendation to others to refer. And that's why even we started in Greater Jakarta area, in peri-urban, we stretched a bit to Bandung because some in Jakarta areas, they didn't give consent for the survey. So, but some caveats we need to notice here that not all SEs surveyed are SEPs as in the definition of a ISEA, but maybe if you followed the presentation this morning, we would rather call it preliminary SEPs or pre-SEPs organizations. That's what we found later. And then the numbers and other quantitative answers, I would say that might be compromised because of the custom. I think it's the same with the Bangladesh. And people are really not used to deal with figures. And some small SEs, they don't have written record of their financial, they don't have bookkeeping, and as well as limited access provided. Some big cooperatives and some MFIs, they don't provide access to their financial data. So these are some caveats in this research. And I just draw here some of the main findings from rapid appraisal. That most of the prominent figures that we interviewed saying that ISEA as a concept is relatively new because it's just emerged in the recent 5 years, initiated by NGOs, donors, charity, CSR. And some of them mostly started by individuals also with social concerns. And as in Bangladesh, they started and then they didn't realize that they could make profit out of it. So they start with just some of the interviews saying that we have the neighborhood full of poor people, the poor migrants from rural agricultural workers, they don't have jobs. So I start this thing, trainers, impact indicators prefer to be employed to measure impact if such a measurement will be conducted. Then the government will come to you and say that you're illegal. Anyway, so yeah, next. Some of the cited future internal and external challenges and facilitating factors for future growth. As I said before, a lot of them are still preliminary steps. So many still cited internal problem of organizations. They said that not enough committed and competent board capacity development and management of people. So internal management aspects still it's a big challenges. You can see all the committed, competent managers, development of second liners. If it comes 5 years and then you have to regenerate new leaders, and that they found it difficult to find dedicated people to do that. And that's external. It's for external challenges. It's interesting that a lot of them cited about the corruption. 11, 12 industry market practices negatively affecting SEs, and also lack of programs supporting social enterprise development. So they actually felt alone, and they have to fight, they have to struggle with the challenges. No one really invests in them, including, of course, government, as they see that government is the main actor, but they are quite left aside by the government. That's not to mention the corruption. And that's are the external challenges. And scaling up is quite difficult because they say that it's hurdled by financial and production management. they want to scale up. They know that there are demands, some of the crafting and recycle paper, for instance, but they don't have enough capital and also not enough human resource for scaling up. Some of the conclusions here that I mentioned before: perceived impact, mainly economic and financial improvement, as the nature of the organization, mostly MFIs and cooperatives. Human resource management, that remains to be big challenges, and lack of specific programs that aiming at empowering women beyond their economic role. And also this aspect of gaining recognition, as said before, they say that they're like left alone, but recently, I think in the recent 5-10 years, the agencies like Asoka or British Council or some of the private banks, they started to make a lot of competitions for social enterprises. So people come from Timor, from Sulawesi, from Kalimantan, gathered in Jakarta, like 10, 20 nominations. They were given opportunities to have exhibition in the heart of Jakarta Convention Center, and then they're given the spots on the television or on the mass media, things like that, that try to gain the recognition for the existing the existing initiatives. And that's good, but it's, yeah. And government also, some of the government ministries try to do that. Support from government can be realized in terms of supportive policies, like access to capital, easier business permits, processing and provision, market opportunities and subsidies. It's very like that's what the respondents say. And yeah, as I said before, many of them, they are not SAPs yet. They're still preliminary or pre-SAPs, as they're not focused on creating sufficient wealth or distributing. They still struggle with the organization's development and how to make profits. So there should be kind of incentives through policy and program to assist this small scale to grow, and then for the big SEs to look for most effective ways to reach out to the poor. And there's some interesting in terms of in the context of Indonesia as the most populous Muslim countries, that Sharia-based financial institutions like BMT, it's a cooperative microfinance institutions, Sharia-based, so they have the section that manages alms and charity funds, but they have sections that make profits and investments and also produce things. So it's kind of the hybrid institutions as well that have, we can see that there's have dual values and big potentials to be developed. Also expanding market for ethical, which means ethically responsible in terms of environment and also social, and also Islamic related products, those accessories, fields and things like that. These are opportunities in the future that can be addressed in many ways. This ethical business is mostly also, we reckon, because of the surveys being done in Jakarta. So middle class, raising number of middle class who have this awareness, developed awareness, they started to think about buying products that are not harmful to the environment, that are not harmful to other people. And this is a kind of opportunity that can be given to SE's development in the future. I think that's my presentation. Thank you.
Questions? Please.
I learned a lot from your two presentations, and I know that this is a research report, so there are a lot of conditions in order to have your finding like this. And because I learned that from at the beginning of our opening workshop, Dr. Lisa said that the expected result of our conference would be a result to advocacy to the Philippines government. So from this perspective, and I'm from SPERI, Vietnam, Social Policy Ecology Research Institute. So I'd like to share my 4 questions. So I think it's because you also have 8 months for research, and you will have a lot of things for research. But these are my 4 questions, just like suggested reference for your further studies, or you already have it in your research. But in my opinion, I prefer to listen in order to make it more fruitful in terms of the advocacy. Okay, my first question is, what are the social problems that Bangladesh or Indonesia facing? Besides the context of your countries, you should analyze more in terms of the social enterprise perspectives. So what is the social problems facing your countries? And why these problems appear? You should be more analysis in terms of the social problems first. And the second question is why the state or other sector, they don't have concrete solutions like the SEs to solve these problems facing your country now. And my third question is how Bangladesh or Indonesia social enterprise did make their action plans or their social business plans to deal with these social problems. So the action plans here is, I mean, three kind of plans: activities plan, financial plans, and human resource plans. Because you did have very thick and deep interview with many social enterprise in your two countries, so we should make a list or more analysis in order to present out what did they do to solve the social problems. And my last question is, I learned a lot from your challenges here, but for myself it's too vague. It's not clearly enough in terms of the social enterprise perspective, because we should analyze and present why it is challenged in terms of social enterprise, because that is very popular challenges for all sectors in societies: finance, corruption, human resources, management. I think it's common challenges for any sectors in society, especially now. So I would like to learn more about how is the challenges analysis in the build of the social enterprise. Yeah, so that is my comments. I would love to learn more from your research. Thank you.
Yeah, social problems of Indonesia. There's too many. I cannot mention. Yeah, first, I think you can mention a lot. You can start from poverty, inequality. Definitely, it's raising inequality. Now our Gini ratio is 0.43, which is the highest since our independence day. So it's although our economic growth is pretty stable over the last, I think, since even 2008, we survived the GEC, the global economic crisis, but inequality rise. So we have 100 million people live in Java Island alone, and then the other 100 something spread into other 16,000 islands. So it's a huge challenge of how to distribute the wealth and prosperity to all people, because it's different things. The poverty types in Java Island is different with Eastern Indonesia. Eastern Indonesia, they have small islands spread, so the government will find it difficult to build infrastructures. In Java Island, they have like too many people over very small size of area. So which one would you prioritize first? You want to reduce the poverty with the impact for 10 million people, but the severity of poverty is like this, or the severity of poverty is this, but outside, and it's huge investment that you have to buy. You have to build ports, you have to buy floating health centers instead of the one that based on lands, and it's I think it's 10 times investment than the one that builds in the land, unlike a continent with spread. So that's, of course, this is not defending our government, not defending our government, but that's the challenges of poverty in Indonesia. Is very diverse in terms of concentration, in terms of inequality, in terms of infrastructure gaps between islands, and you have to add up cultural, ethnic, religions, yes, on all of the 300 ethnic groups,
make a difference between
6 state recognized religions, and hundreds other local religions. So it's not a homogeneous country, and you have to tackle different things in different way. Marginal groups. You can mention indigenous groups who have hundreds of them. And yeah, social problems, we can spend forever to talk about social problems in Indonesia. But in as is perspectives, I think what our survey found out that this mostly started by individuals or NGOs. Individuals, and we survey them in urban areas. So some individuals just have social concerns and they think like, we have some money, why don't we start this? And then it's because some of the interviews, they simply just because they saw that the neighborhood are poor, or some live near the leprosy center or for rehabilitation for leprosy. And some of the, this is interesting, one of the case study, it's the rehabilitation center there mostly come from all over Indonesia. But these people, they are ashamed to come back, to return to their communities. They are ashamed to come back to Sulawesi, they are ashamed to come back to Kalimantan because they feel that they would not be accepted. So they live surrounding the rehabilitation center, no job, nothing to do, but depending on government assistance or charity of the neighborhoods. So some groups of youth started the empowerment for the ex-leprosy people. So they started to train them and to make accessories or clothing and so things like that. So I would say that the role of S is on the micro level, at the micro level, but the state is up here at the macro level. So how the state can reach down to micro level so that to what you can say, to scale up, to replicate, to scale up this small, connecting them, the dots, and then so make so that will make the impact more tangible. If we can talk in development effectiveness terminology, it's tangible impact. So that if you see small dots, 2, 3 dots, they don't mean anything. But if you connect hundreds of them or thousands of them, that's the role of the state, I think. So the state, I think, in the public figure of social enterprise that we interviewed, they say that this hybrid industry sort of established rather independent from the government. Yes, they are. They did establish independently, but the role of the state is, I think, in the next level, providing conducive environment in terms of policy environment. I was really surprised and really glad to hear the presentation this morning, the COSEA presentation. I think it's something that will be very good to be replicated in other countries. It's amazing how they started with certification, how they started with set up some standards. That's what are lacking in all, I think, most of the emerging countries, India, Bangladesh, Indonesia. Yes. Even our informal sectors hasn't been gone anywhere since 10 years ago. There's no really effort to make them formal sectors so that you can also protect the workers with formal insurance, social security. And there's still like that. And that could be seen as a first step, how the government can step into this wild world of as these small enterprises and intervene through their role as policymakers.
Yeah, hi, James from Oxfam.
I'm sorry, it's just one question.
That's fine.
I just want to ask, in both countries, which type of social enterprise have you been looking at the moment, which you feel is having the greatest social impact today, and which type of social enterprise do you feel has the greatest potential to be bringing social impact, let's say in 5 years' time? And it may be the same type, or it may be that there's something which is emerging which you think has got great potential in 5 years' time. Is that clear enough?
Yes.
So it's interesting to hear a little bit from both countries.
I have like 5 minutes. The impact of First is about the impact that the EU perceived on the document. The document that is very hard to find.
From both countries, which type of existing social enterprises from your
creating bigger impact.
That has the biggest impact.
That's the hit past.
Based
For
on
the future, which type do you think?
I don't know. I'm thinking.
I think from this research, it's microfinance mostly. So they, as my presentation said, mostly said economic, so income generation, income alternative sources of income. So they see waste there, they see papers, they see plastics, and they see that that can be used by the poor people to find alternative impacts because most are jobless. And
yes, the same thing, income generating and employment opportunity. Yes, mostly same, and some now, as I mentioned earlier, like Wisconsin, they are also focusing on that waste management and also the health issues. So there are some emerging social business, but still I think that 99% are focusing on the income generating activities as well as the sustained. Some organizations they are already sustained, and also I mean somehow like BRAC and also Grameen Bank, and also there are some organizations who are already they are sustained, and also they are focusing on the rural people and trying to reduce the poverty, and also trying to empower the women in terms of economy, political and social, because I think that as she mentioned earlier, that poverty, the term, the poverty and the poor, it's very complicated because you can't measure only in terms of economy, because it's multi-dimensional aspect. So even if we consider about the empowerment, we have to look from multi-dimensional approaches. So I think there are many organizations, basically they are microfinance based. Although now they have different kind of activities, they have just introduced other things, but still microfinance organizations, they are very dominant, and they have been working for last 30 years or 40 years. And like Indonesia, I can say that they have already reduced the poverty in Bangladesh. But what I said, at least they have reached to the rural people, and they are trying, to improve the situation and the condition of the people. So it's emerging. I mean, I should say that evolving and also the emerging in Bangladesh. Even the government, earlier the government also had some kind of government-run cooperative system. But so somehow government are also, involved with some sort of social business earlier, but they never recognize themselves as that. Rather, what she asked the challenges that they are facing. Yes, when you said that you are an NGO, it's okay for the government, but when you mention that you are involved with social business, social enterprises, then they, become very, scared what they are actually doing. And also the other problem that sometimes you say that, yes, of course, most of the problem or the challenges are, common for everybody, but I was just thinking about the recent incident that happened with Professor Yunus. Sometimes the government also, think or consider personally, like the Professor Yunus, whatever he's doing, I may agree with him or not, but the person has become, more important to the, or a threat for the country. So it's also one kind of challenges that we also face.
Before, may I just throw in a couple of clarifications? Just focusing on these two issues of impact and sustainability. First, on the issue of impact, just to clarify, the research, when you cite the impacts, they were impacts as perceived by your respondents who are heads or people in the SEs themselves, right? And were there also questions directed at the target groups also? So, and second is that these are essentially, you mentioned purposive, limited interviews, right? So I'm raising that because I think it's important to appreciate the limitations of research and the extent to which we draw conclusions about the impact that can be drawn, that it is limited to the methodology. Yeah.
I would like to answer the question because from the very beginning I was scared about the research, because I also shared with Lisa earlier that I mean, we just interviewed the SC and the management. So if you really, really want to look at whether these programs are actually working and, you know, reducing the poverty, you have to go to the so-called target group or the beneficiaries. But the limitations of this research is that we didn't do that. And as an anthropologist, definitely, I have this kind of, you know, feelings that we have to look and we have to, you know, hear the voices of the local people and the target people. Otherwise, you can say, we can't conclude. So it's just the beginning, according to Lisa, that it's a beginning of the research. And later on, we will go to the local people and then we will, you know, look at what is happening. Because I did my research on basically microfinance and especially the Grameen Bank and others. So I can say, and what I am, you know, I have added in this research, that's basically from my previous research, I incorporated the local voices, nothing else. Thank you.
Yeah. And then just a follow-up clarification. On the question of sustainability is asked from the point of view of the definition of social enterprise. This is a question I thought to. So when you say a social enterprise is sustainable, are we basically saying that it is able to sustain itself primarily from the profits or surplus that it is able to make from the delivery of goods and services? Because if that is a definition, then the issue of sustainability of BRA or the other organizations may have to be taken, to qualify, because many of these NGOs are sustainable not purely from the surplus of the operations, but a lot from the grants and donations. But they're sustainable. That's another means, you know, you can describe it as social capital. So I'm just saying in terms of the clarification of the thoughts.
Sorry, we have a definition that the majority of the income has to come through trade to be sustainable. That's the definition that we use. The majority of the income, the turnover, the whole of organisation.
Okay. So it has to be primarily from the
trade.
From the more.
Yeah, from whether it's trading in services or goods or.
Okay.
In terms of sustainability, so definitely BRAC, Grameen Bank is the big or giant organization in Bangladesh. We can give the put this example because we are working with small enterprises in the rural area. And definitely we are facing a lot of challenges in terms of sustainability for the small enterprises. Because of the some limitations in terms of technical capacity, in terms of management capacity, in terms of social problem, in terms of policy issues, a lot of challenges we are facing. But we can't give the example like, you know, BRAC or, Grameen Bank. So there are giant organizations in Bangladesh. They have huge wealth and resources.
Can I just add something for 1 minute? Yes, definitely. As I mentioned earlier, that only 5%, less than 5%, they think that they are student, and the 95% they don't. They are just evolving, emerging. Yes, definitely a small organization, they are facing lots of problems, but still they are, you know, fighting.
Yeah.
So definitely there are examples of cracks, and also there are many examples who are, you know, just emerging.
Okay, please.
I think just the identity of what is a set or what is an SDA, if you're an NGO, if you're a worker or a supplier. I think part of that is precisely because you're changing from being a worker to being a stakeholder in the enterprise. So once the worker says, I'm a supplier, you know he's an entrepreneur. That's, for me, that's I come from the Philippines, I run a business, so I know that that changes. Once they start thinking of themselves as suppliers and not as workers, then they have a stake in the business. Similar to the NGO, the ones that starts it. If they still consider themselves an NGO, they're still not into all the risks and all the stupidities that come with running a business. And I think that's also part of the transformation that will take place when you start thinking of yourself as an enterprise and not as an NGO trying to do business. I think that is part of the transformation that you will see in the sphere. But the other thing I wanted to ask was also, I raise this only because I think maybe that would be a good question to ask for perception. Are you a worker or a supplier? Are you an NGO or an enterprise? And when you see that transformation in the response taking place, then you'll see there's some progress as far as the social enterprise sector is concerned. Secondly, it has to do with the role of women. I was struck by the comment that women have to, it's very hard for women to go out in Bangladesh without the, so does being engaged in a social enterprise, does that change the, how do you say, does it redefine the place of women in the community, not necessarily in the whole Bangladesh society, but at least in the community? And then have you, or is your research, or could your research look into where specifically do women make a difference? Some stories in the Philippines where sometimes it's when the cooperative is in trouble, then a woman comes in and turns it around. And when a woman leader comes in and turns it around, then it becomes successful. Sometimes you hear those kinds of stories, and in some other cases, having cash, having money changes your status, even at home or possibly in the community. So, and then, does the enterprise redefine the space that women can move around in the community as a result of participating in the business?
Yes, please.
I'm Mojarul. Very good presentation. Extreme weather disturbance, about 17% in your country. And we in Bangladesh is working different job areas, and they have some climatic shocks over the years sometimes. There could be a very good social enterprise with a structure, with skilled people, overcoming some barrier, political, it could be policy level, could be social. It could be a well-run social enterprise, but suddenly natural shocks make it damaged by 100%. So how could the SEs plan better to reduce these kinds of natural shocks?
In the context of calamities and...
Yes, I'm telling you.
So the question is related to how to deal essentially.
Yes.
Particularly if you are a social enterprise, because that's an issue.
Yeah, for the survey in Indonesia is about 1/3 suffered by extreme weather disturbance. It's 17%, 16 out of 59 is suffered by weather disturbance. That's extreme. So how could they plan it better, to reduce these kinds of shocks?
Maybe Oxfam will fund in the next meeting.
We've seen in the
Philippines,
yes. Last year there was a Haiyan, and in 1 hour washed out everything, even life. No, there is nothing.
That's why I told that, especially in Bangladesh case, who based on agriculture and raw materials, they are facing.
Think about not only Bangladesh, we are talking about the Philippines, we are talking about Indonesia, we are talking about the Bangladesh. The three countries, we have the experience of climate shocks.
I think
so the
point
climate
is
change as social enterprise could be a research topic.
Except whether the methodology and the depth of the interviews allowed them to focus particularly on the topic. I think both seem to be saying that it's important, but our research process and probing did not allow you to go into much detail in that aspect. So I think that's what I'm getting from. Yes.
Two things on the question about like the shocks and stresses. There is actually a workshop group that will tackle that on building resilient livelihoods and sustainable social enterprises. So I think it would be good to input in that session. Second is, I am Jo from Oxfam. Sorry. And I specifically looked at women economic leadership as part of my role. And so my interest in this research, considering the limitations of the methodology, because we just limited into survey. But I'm particularly interested to probe further into the findings and conclusion about women's economic empowerment. Because I think most of you, for both Indonesia and Bangladesh, talk about women's inclusion. Somehow there's participation, they would be, you know, like management position, etc. But beyond that, like even beyond income, generating income from it. So I would actually further ask what kind of income is this? Is this an income that is enough for women to gain social recognition? Or is it something, an income that would actually lift the women and their families out of poverty? So what kind of income does social enterprises really generate for the poor and for women especially? And then the other aspect as well is in terms of, well, I'm really looking at the transformational aspect. And I think yeah, I think maybe because of the limitations of methodology, and then so we just like kind of reduced into just providing description, but not, even the data that we had is really limited for us to probe further. But there are, beyond the economic, like income, when we look at women's economic empowerment, it's actually also looking at how are their participation or their leadership also transforming gender-based inequalities in the market at the household level, because that is also important. It's really also about whether, so what my interest really here is that whether are we able to identify different barriers for women's economic empowerment within the SE sector, and what would be opportunities, which for me, these are important when we actually identify our agenda for women in post-2015.
Says something. Definitely women have been able to change their previous, their economic condition from previous to recently they have been able to change. They are getting some sort of bargaining power with their, that they can use within the household and also within the society, especially when they work together as a group. And their social mobility is also increased, although they are still constrained. Their attitude towards savings and their children's education, that has also been changed. And also they are buying some sort of asset which they didn't consider earlier, like if we consider the Amortasen's entitlement. So as I mentioned earlier, that they are trying to reduce the capability, discrimination and deprivation, but at the same time, if we consider about the entitlement, it is still beyond that. Women, mostly, especially if we look at the microfinance-based, business, mostly women, they, borrow the money, but the users are the main. They are using the money, they are doing the business. So still, we have to focus on that, which also created the gender inequality, and also it does that gender inequality produce and reproduce within the society. That's all, and I think that in future when we do research and we go to the the local people, then we will get more information.
I think about this women's role, we cannot ignore the fact that the framework for women in development has been started in 1960s or so, and then gender and development recently, but still we have problems with WID in 2014. I think it hasn't solved since WID era until now. So the problem is it's still the same, but that some of the women in our survey, they mentioned about education as the highest impact of what they're doing with the income generating from their involvement with the SEs, so they can send children to school. I think that's in the top priority, and then health and education mostly. So the things with the microfinance. Also, I again have to emphasize that this survey is done in Jakarta and Greater Peri-urban area. If you want to find fair trade organizations, social business, you can go out to Bali. You have big SEs there, has chocolate factory. Yeah, chocolate, you would be interested. And it's huge, profitable. They have hundreds of workers, but in Sulawesi as well, and in Kalimantan, good big revolving fund, social enterprises. So this, because most of our samples are microfinance institutions, we can say that income generating, that is the top impact that although it's also started when this survey started, I think Lisa would recall that I opposed the questionnaire, didn't ask respondents, the poor people, directly about what they perceive about impact. So that's the limitation of the research instrument that we used, we employed for this research. But yeah, I think that because the questions mostly ask closed questions and some open-ended, but not explored really further about women, WERD, also framework for women in economic.
Okay. Okay, last question.
SE with working with street children, they received regularly not projects, orders for products from street children. So they're buyers. They are the buyers for the products of SEs. And some provided avenues for exhibitions, for things like that, but not yet formalized into a mechanism because it's very depend on the Pertamina, the state-owned oil company, provided the avenues, exhibitions, place, also purchasing the products. But that very much depends on their approach with Pertamina rather than a rigid mechanism that is established.
Well, allow me to just briefly, I guess, highlight some of the points in the discussion. Well, I think this is essentially an initial attempt. So it's primarily I see that as an initial attempt at profiling. And some of the key issues immediately, particularly that was evident in Bangladesh, even just this asking, are you an SE, and understanding the whole concept, that in itself is something that needed clarification. Like some would be in it without knowing it, right? So that's just one whole issue. Okay? And I think within the limits of their research, in terms of the area of at least perceived impact, as explained by the respondents who belong to the organizations, and partly because of the predominance of microfinance institutions in their sample, is of course that the impact has been in the area of essentially primarily economic empowerment. I think the other point that I picked up with regards to the two presentations is that when you talk about the existing state of SEs, there will be a few very big ones, but quite a huge number, at least in the sample, of very, very small ones. And I pick up again from Indonesia's case is quite a number of them still struggling with their basic business model, right? Not being able even to earn enough to cover their expenses. Okay. I think that the suggestions are all well taken. I think in terms of gaining overall a better understanding of the roles that social enterprises want to play or can play in the context of social problems and in the context of the failure of both the state and the traditional players, meaning even existing businesses, to be able to address those needs. I think that continues to be a relevant question. Perhaps SE should think about, in a sense, it sharpens their positioning and their reason for being. Okay, and admittedly, I think the research highlights many issues, and a number of us here have very specific interests and concerns, either in the area of impact, for example, women empowerment, or in the area of dealing with specific challenges, such as the context of climate change, of disaster, okay, which certainly are opportunities for further exploration. Okay. And I guess also there, it's an interplay of the regulatory environment. I think that was some of the issues that were raised. Okay. Yeah, I guess, that's essentially my take in terms of the points that were raised. And maybe just maybe share a few thoughts going beyond what is defined. I think, and integrating what happened today. I think there are several dimensions, I think, that all of these have been discussed. And one is the whole issue of the goals of the social enterprise. And based on this morning's presentation, it's essentially, again, this is my take, when you say a social enterprise, it's a combination of a social goal and an economic goal. Somewhere in between, you may be more towards social or more towards economic, but certainly a social enterprise needs to have both goals. A second aspect is really the roles of the priority target group of the social enterprise. Again, this may vary. If you're targeting women, if you're targeting the poor, various enterprises may define the roles of these target groups differently, ranging from simply being clients, to being employees, to being managers, to being co-owners, and part of the governance. So again, it can be a continuum. I think, based on my understanding of microfinance institutions, most have just targeted primarily the marginalized groups, the poor, as clients. Okay, but very few. Well, of course, you mentioned Grameen. They have women on the board, but again, you raise issues of positionally, yes, but in terms of effective capacity to function as board members, that continues to remain a challenge. Then the third is that, at least based on their review, and I think it is also because of the nature of microfinance, that there is a predominance of microfinance institutions. To me, it's because the business model for microfinance is pretty cut and dry. You lend money, you charge an interest, and, well, the reality is the interest is fairly high, substantially enough to cover a lot of your costs, right? But I think the challenges for the business models of the other fields, health, water, recycling, etc., particularly when you are operating it or want to deal with the marginalized groups and the context under which they have to operate, raises very important business model challenges. Okay, so microfinance is a far bit ahead, at least as far as sustainability is concerned. But of the types where the role of the target group has primarily been that of client rather than owner, with the exception of the cooperative model, which again I think in Bangladesh does not seem to have taken off as much. Okay? Then really the issue is, dimension is, when we say social enterprise, the extent, the role of the target group in governance and ownership, I mentioned that. Okay? And I already mentioned also another key challenge, defining the service delivery and sustainability model, okay, particularly for the non-lending types. Okay. Financial sources was, I think, part of the intention because there was a profiling of the sources of equity. Okay. Yeah. So I think I'm just saying that these are different ways with which we can look at social enterprises and begin to hang some of the challenges and the opportunities that surround it. Okay. And lastly, just from my point of view, given again, and I guess it's my academic part of the issue, given again the limitations of their methodology, I think we take the conclusions on impact as indicative, and that these are impacts as perceived and explained by the respondents of a very purposive sample. And I would caution, even in the field of microfinance, some of you who are in this, right? There have been attempts at reviewing a whole history. Several authors have done history reviews of various impact studies globally of microfinance. And truth to tell, their conclusions seem to be that, well, there are micro-studies with impacts here and there, both positive and negative. But the jury on microfinance is out yet, particularly when you talk about impact in the sense of, well, again, I should not generalize, but impacts remain a subject for further clarification. I think it is the same challenge that face the social enterprise sector at this stage. Okay? Which, me personally, maybe at this stage, my own bias is, let's focus on the doing first, because we need to proliferate more and then worry about the impacts later. Because doing the impact studies in a very robust way will require substantial, could require substantial investments. You begin to move into randomized controlled trials. And all that. Anyway, that's just my... Okay, so sorry for keeping you from lunch. What's the timetable? Now
lunch
until...
is served.
Yeah, until...
Lunch is almost gone.
So when do we get together?
1:30.
12:30. Okay.
12:30 to 1:30.
Yeah,
and then
okay.
be back at the plenary